The UAD apocalypse, ladies and gentlemen. Appraisers, lenders, underwriters, yes, even you dear desk jockeys of the collateral risk field. Do you feel it? That faint, insidious tremor beneath your feet? Is it the winds of progress or merely the bureaucratic grim reaper sharpening his scythe? What is the UAD update, if not an alchemist's attempt to transmute data into clarity, while introducing the potential for no two people to interpret it the same way? Will it streamline the appraisal process or merely drown us in a sea of structured ambiguity? Appraisers, are you prepared to relearn your craft at the behest of the GSEs? Lenders, will you rejoice in newfound consistency, or will you find yourself paralyzed, staring at a drop-down menu, unsure whether you're ordering an appraisal for a single family, a 2 to 4 unit, a condo, or heaven help you, a co-op? And underwriters, poor beleaguered underwriters, will this brave new world finally deliver transparency or just provide more intricate ways to get lost in the details? Join us as we peel back the layers of this grand experiment in appraisal evolution. Change is coming. Will you master it or be mastered by it? This is the Appraisal Buzzcast. Stay tuned, and may your adjustments always be supported.
ACI introduces ACI Sky Workbench, a cutting-edge cloud-based platform designed to streamline UR/AR appraisal report generation like never before. With seamless workflow integration, automated data management, and built-in compliance, Workbench empowers appraisers to work smarter, faster, and with greater accuracy. Join us for the Workbench beta launch and live demos at the ACTS conference in San Antonio on April 5th through 8th. Visit aciweb.com for more info. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast with your host, Hal Humphreys.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to today's Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Jim Morrison, and with me, as always, is our host, Hal Humphreys. Let me bring him in. Hey, Hal.
Hi, Jim. How are you today?
Good. Well, we are so excited to welcome back one of our favorites, Liz Green. We're going to talk about the upcoming UAD changes, what it means for the industry, and we also have some pretty special news in store, as Liz was voted the newest Valuation Visionary from the Collateral Risk Network. Hey, Liz. Congratulations.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Liz, I can't thank you enough for taking time to be here. Congratulations again on the acknowledgement of all you do for the industry. I think it's well-deserved. You're going to dive, and we're going to dive deep into that. But before we do, if you don't mind, just quickly introduce yourself to our audience. They may not all know who you are, and tell us a little bit about your history in this industry.
Sure. So again, my name is Liz Green. I'm with a company called Candescent Capital Ventures. We've been consulting in the space for the last couple of years, but I'm not new to the industry. I've worked in mortgage banking technology for my entire career. So the last 30 years has been spent on everything from loan origination, loan servicing, secondary marketing, and my true love, valuation and residential real estate appraisal.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again for being here. Now, you've been a part of the CRN maybe since it started. Tell us what tell us what this award means to you. What has been some of the feedback you've heard since the announcement, and what is the part you're most excited about?
Oh gosh. So I have been with the CRN a long time. I would say primarily for the last 15 years, and I am just so over the moon thrilled with this acknowledgement, this recognition from my friends and peers and partners within the Collateral Risk Network, mostly because it is a voted by your peers award. And it is something that has come with a lot of well wishes and accolades, and also the visionaries that have gone before me. When this award was created, several years ago, and it was one of the first of its kind to really recognize professionals within a space. And dare I say, my heroes, my mentors have all passed through these gates of being a visionary. And not only am I honored, I honor them and their contribution, not only to the industry, but also to what they've given to me. So I
Yeah.
always do try to recognize that and recognize that we all have an obligation to pay it forward.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, Valuation Visionary is an amazing award. Let's take a little bit of a shift and get visionary about what we can expect from the industry around this new UAD.
All right.
There's one specific part of this that you and I have talked about before, that I think is really interesting, and that is loan officers, originators, and underwriters, and how are they going to deal with this new UAD?
Sure. So I think that it's a perfect segue because really what led to the valuation visionary recognition was the work I've done in data standards. And I've chaired the MISMO Property and Valuation Services Work Group for the last 14, 15 years. And I've been kind of involved in helping to bring the power of data standards forward into the process and the reporting for appraisal. And so, one of the things that I think is really exciting about the next generation of the Uniform Appraisal Data Set, or UAD, which is under the Uniform Mortgage Data Program for FHFA, which is the regulator of Fannie and Freddie, in terms of how that all kind of fits together, is that when we brought out the first round of introducing a data set and data standards to appraisal way back in 2011 for the first UAD, or what we know as UAD 2.6, also known as Legacy these days, is that was really bringing data to the existing template, right? So none of the business requirement of the actual templates or static forms that the appraisers were using changed. There were some things that were added, kind of shoehorned in as abbreviated fields, but there was a conscious decision by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac not to change the front side, the business requirement. As we fast forward into today's world with UAD 3.6, there is a very intentional desire and action to change the business requirement, the front end, that delivery of the appraisal information to the end user, whether that's the lender client or the consumer. One of the first things that you'll notice as you start to look at these pieces is that new URAR reporting layout matches the layout of the closing disclosure and the loan estimate. And in point of fact, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did use the same designers to develop that look and feel of that new report. And I like to point out that it's really important that we think about it as a report. It is not a form.
Right.
You can't print it out and fill it out with a pencil. You could with the old forms, right? You could print out that blank sheet and you could fill it out by hand. That is not the case. This is a technology oriented, data-driven, dynamic reporting output that comes from a technology that allows the appraiser to interact with property information, assess things like condition and quality and defects, deficiencies, and damages, and a number of other things that are now much more specific in terms of how they're asked to be collected and presented. And so to that end, I think that for lenders and underwriters and consumers, I do believe they're going to see an immediate uptick in understanding the message of what the appraisal is trying to tell us. Gone are the cryptic abbreviations, right? It's separated by semicolons. Gone is that kind of, first 6 pages that are pretty tight and restrictive, and then 30 pages of text after that, right? So we like to always say that the appraisal has got to tell a story. You should be able to read through the appraisal and understand what that professional is trying to tell you, paint the picture of the market, of that subject property, and to support his or her conclusions and opinion of value. The new style of reporting will provide a much better forum, a much better vehicle is the word I'm looking for, to present that information. And it's because it is dynamic, it's going to shrink and expand as needed for the information that's unique to that particular subject property, right? And it will also optionally show information only when it applies, right? So if we have disaster mitigation is a favorite example, that would only be there if it actually is present on the property.
Yeah, it seems to me like I've done a lot of reading of appraisal reports over the
Sure.
years, and what hit me as you were talking is the legacy style of you got the first 6 pages are kind of uniform, and then this free form narrative at the end of it, and each appraiser approaches that a different way. They've got their own
Yeah.
style of doing it,
Yeah.
and it almost feels like a choose your own journey
Yeah.
narrative format,
Yeah.
right? You got to
Yeah.
come back here and find this thing, then come back, and the story is disjointed.
Yeah.
Whereas the new URAR allows for the appraiser to tell the parts of the story where they're appropriate, and
That's
not
right.
just say see addendum, see addendum, see
That's
addendum,
right.
which is in itself confusing.
That's right. And that's a really good point.
So the concern that I've heard from the lender side and the underwriter side and the originator side is we don't know how we've been ordering a 1004, we've been ordering a 1070, we've been ordering these different forms because we know what the property is, we know what form it goes on.
Yeah.
Some of the people I've talked to on that side of the mortgage process, they don't even know what questions to ask about the uniform appraisal data set and what it means for them. So let's start with how are they going to order a report?
Sure, sure. That's one of my favorite topics. So first I will say, don't overthink this. You actually know already a lot of what you need to know. So when you think about the loan transaction, you think about that loan app, right? We know the purpose of the loan. The purpose of the loan we see on today's appraisal form as assignment type, purchase or refi, right? We also know what kind of loan are we doing, right? We know if it's a FHA, a VA, or a conventional, right? So we already know that there's information in our LOS that describe that and carries throughout the life cycle of the loan that will be utilized in the new UAD, right? So we have mortgage type, we have assignment type, which is, ties to loan purpose. And then we have some other I encourage folks to think about this really more as characteristics of the property as opposed to trying to use that old proxy number of, because if I say, Hal, describe to me a 1004, you're going to go, oh, single family, interior, exterior, market value, because that
Yeah,
number means that,
yeah,
right? So we can use a lot of the information that's already in the loan record. And then there's some additional information at the property level. So a lot of folks, especially, and they might not be thinking about it this way, but if you think about when you go into collateral underwriter, for example, the first thing you're going to do before you order any assignments, you're going into a CU or an LCA, and it's saying, what's the property address? What is your owner estimate of value, or what do you think it's worth, right? And what do? They go in the background and look at the data. They look at the public record, they look at the MLS, they go, oh, this is a townhouse, right? We've seen it before, and they are giving you this kind of information. So that additional due diligence of the property also happens for a lot of AMCs today. They already do that in preparation of how to assign. And that
right.
starts to fill out the rest of those pieces of what kind of assignment is this. And then in addition to that stuff, the MISMO Property and Valuation Services Work Group, our working committee, over the last 6 months, we developed a procurement data set specification, which is really a subset of fields that you could consider as an AMC or a technology provider that you might want to use to augment the things I was just talking about. So you might have, if you think about like an engagement letter that we use for the appraiser, in the engagement letter, that's the other fun thing about moving towards technology. Today, the poor appraiser gets, it says, give me a 1004, and by the way, read this 6-page letter and pull out of there the things that you have to be sure and do, right? I want photos of this. I want it, XYZ, PDQ, all these additional things. So those engagement details can actually be digitized, and we have data points in that procurement data set that could be used for that. Now
Okay.
that's probably more of an advanced step as folks start to move forward into this, but I do believe that we will get folks using that over time. Once they get over the new paradigm shift of instead of saying 1004, I would like I would like a traditional appraisal, right? So you and I might say that that means full to us. Full means interior, exterior, right? The GSEs call that traditional, but they've
Right.
also added an inspection type, right? And an inspection type for interior and an inspection type for exterior, which is really exciting when you think about connecting the dots with property data collection activities and other valuation events that may have already occurred, and we might be on an upgrade path to a traditional report. So that inspection type can accommodate a physical view, a virtual view, or no view at all.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful, I think, in the long run.
And I think in the world of transparency, that's a much cleaner way to articulate up front.
Yes,
We're only looking at this virtually. We're only looking at data provided by somebody else, or we're looking at the entire property. It
that's right.
it's very clear up front what was done,
That's
as
right.
opposed to a legacy 1004 that is built off of property data collection information, and then somewhere in a hidden field in there is a note that says this is based on a PDC.
That's right.
I think this is a good idea. So the other question I've heard is, and this falls in the realm of chicken and egg. Everybody needs to be on the same sheet of the hymnal, right? We've all got
Yeah.
to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And so the GSEs are rolling this out under limited production starting towards the end of this year. And, you know, not all lenders are going to be using this yet.
That's right.
Not all appraisers are going to be ready yet.
That's right.
How do we work to get everybody on the same page?
Well, that's a really good question. So this first piece, September 8th, I believe, through January 25th, limited implementation. This is not a test. This is real production, real files, right? And it's intended for folks that feel like they're ready to get started. I don't believe that anyone would say, yeah, turn the entire pipe on everything I've got. I think they're going to be selective. And it's really going to be premised on, do we have appraiser partners that are ready to provide the new service, A, and do we have our lender operations ready to process the results of that new service? So it is, I think, going to be a situation where folks are either going to overtly on the lender client say, I want old or new, 2.6 or 3.6, or the lender client during that period of time might say, hey, AMC, I'll take a 3.6 if you can give it to me. If not, I'll take a 2.6.
Okay.
But all of this is going to require a lot of good communication between the trading partners, right? Up and down the channel, from lender client through AMC to appraiser. And I also think that we have to recognize that this, while it is limited production and it's real files and not test, people are going to kind of be dipping their toe in, right? So it's going to take a little bit of time. That I think it's great that the GSEs have given us, an overall holiday at the end of the year. So you have September, October, November, December, and most of January. And
Yeah.
then that begins broad adoption. January 26th begins broad adoption, which means that during that period of time, both styles will coexist, right, within everyone's process. So everybody has to be able to understand the two. I think it's really important that we call UAD 3.6. That's what the GSEs refer to it as. It's challenging just to say URAR because that's technically the name of the 1004,
Yeah.
right? But I think that, at least in my experience, when I'm referring to a legacy form, I give it the number. And when I'm referring to the new report, I call it the URAR. And the
Fair
other
enough.
big thing is that it is a report. It is not a form. And that
Right.
everybody's going to struggle with that initially, right? Especially when we try to understand what is this thing going to contain. There's wonderful documentation on the websites for both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There's a really great training video for the industry that they've prepared. There's great samples. It's all there. And I think, I'm not sure of the rollout date, but there is some professional appraiser only training that also is being offered with CEs that will
Yeah.
start to be available by the various education providers in the industry.
Yeah, and so the appraiser specific training is being offered now at Appraiser Learning. We're already offering
Great.
that training. I'm certain all of the other education providers are as well.
Yeah.
And that this is a really good segue to. So I met with a group of appraisers in a small town in Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, and they were, as so many appraisers are, they're out there doing the work, doing their thing. They're trying to earn a living, and they haven't really paid close attention to what's going on, and they're like totally shocked about this new UAD.
What the what?
Yeah. So I would encourage appraisers that listen to this podcast, avail yourself of the education as soon as possible. But I would also say, if you take the education offering now, for me, and Liz, you may be different, but I'm kind of a Luddite. I like to get my hands, deep into the engine and get grease all over them.
Yep.
Taking the theoretical learning is a good place to start.
That's
But
right.
until you can get your hands on the product and play around with it, that's where the real learning is going to take place. So I know at Appraiser Learning, we're going to be offering the GSE training. We're going to be offering some other training with software providers on where the rubber meets the road. And I think that's going to be critical for appraisers this is not going to be flip the switch. Oh, I'm doing a new report now. It's going to be flip the switch and, oh my good Lord, this is way more than I thought, or this is way different than I thought. And it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be a pain. But the but is, once you get used to it and once you work it into your work process, it's going to be easier and clearer, and I think better for everybody all around.
I would agree 100%. I will say that it's important to talk about exactly how you said the initial training is really more on theory, right? It's
Yeah.
from the end result in mind. It's from the requirement.
Yeah.
The appraiser is responsible for defining the scope of work per use path. So it's really important that the appraiser understand why the GSEs are asking what they're asking for. So all of that material is from the position of the result, right? And so that's a really good place to start. The other thing I think that's really important to understand is that the GSEs have not mandated how the software providers are to implement this. They're coming at it in slightly different ways. And one of the things that I think is really important, we have to allow ourselves the grace to learn something new. So that means putting down some things that we've relied on. So some of the key things that I always hear about is, oh, I want to be able to clone a report. I want to be able to have my hotkeys, and I want to be able to copy and paste my commentary. Most of why the new style of the URAR is designed the way it is, along with the data set, is to actually get rid of all of those kinds of things, because it's not helpful, right? It's not helpful to the end reader when we might have copied a neighborhood description that we've been dragging around for 5 years. It's more helpful if we're doing things in a very live kind of transactional sort of way. And the style of why we say it's so important not to think of it as a form, it's an analysis tool. So you're able to pull information together and you're able to quickly analyze and answer questions. You won't need those hotkeys. You won't need all that text, because all that text has been eliminated in the name of more discrete data points. And so that's really how I think we have to measure the tools that we choose to use as we go forward as appraisers, is that, there's a school of thought that says, keep it as close to how I do it today, because I don't want to change too much, right? But that's only going to get you so far, right? It's kind of that analogy of pay me now or pay me later, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And look, change is hard. There's no two ways about it. Change can be difficult. It can be frightening. It can be all those things. But again, I have seen enough of this new process. I've been through the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac training on teaching the new UAD.
Yep.
And I'm convinced that once we all get our heads around this, it will be a better, cleaner process. Now, I do want to ask you this. So we've talked about appraisers and getting themselves educated and knowing that we're dealing with theory in this class. We're going to deal with where the rubber meets the road when we get our software and engagement, that kind of stuff. What about loan officers, underwriters, originators, the lending side? Should they be getting themselves trained up as well?
Absolutely. So that that video that's currently on the GSE website is called the industry training, and it is geared for everyone, right? And so the other thing I would say is that, you know, it's really incumbent as a good customer service practice, I believe, that those that are working with lender clients help engage them, point them to those resources, provide them information, talk to them about how their process is going to work with their relationship, and be really good partners as it relates to understanding, right? We all win if it's a smooth transition.
Yeah.
And I think that also goes right down into the nitty-gritty details with regard to how engagement letters are structured and how we look at not just quality assurance, but how we handle revisions. You know, one thing that I made mention of to a group this week is, you know, we were all talking about, okay, so we know if we have to do an ROV and we know if we have, you know, a form change or something like that, what we would have called a form change because it started out as conventional and now it's FHA. I said, well, there's also going to be just mistakes, right? Because it's new, right? So we have to recognize and be prepared in our processes to understand that there could just be some oopsies because it's a new thing as people are getting used to this.
Yeah,
And
there will be. There
yeah,
absolutely will be.
yeah. So, you know, those kinds of revisions, for example, I know some AMCs are pretty rigorous about how they measure appraiser quality and that sort of thing. So, you know, we have to look at those processes holistically and fairly as to
Yeah.
what, you know, what kind of things we're experiencing. I also think it's a great way to understand where more training might be needed or better communication might be needed. So we really have to keep our eyes peeled during that initial implementation phase. I think that's a really great time to start to see some of that. And then in the early days of the broad adoption.
Yeah, I love it. Liz, I will say this one last thing. This is like a shameless self-promotion. So we have been working on some lender and underwriter specific training
Sure.
under a new vertical called Enterprise Lender Learning. And if our listeners that are on the lending side of this mortgage loan process want more information about how you can get training on the new UAD and what it means for you, how do I order an appraisal? How do I deal with it when it's delivered to me? Check us out at enterpriselenderlearning.com. We'll put a link to that below this podcast. Liz, thank you so much for being here with me today. I literally love talking to you every time I get the chance. Let's do this. Let's take a real quick break and hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Are you ready to take your career in real estate appraisal to the next level? Join the Appraisal Institute, your go-to source for expert insights, industry trends, and the latest updates from the world of valuation. Whether you're an experienced appraiser or just starting out, they bring you industry resources, classes, and all the knowledge you need to stay ahead. Join today and be part of a community that's shaping the future of the appraisal profession. Visit appraisalinstitute.org to learn more and become a member.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host, and I'm joined today by Liz Green. Some people call her Miss Mismo. Liz, I've so enjoyed the chat with you today, and I'm so excited that you were named Valuation Visionary by the CRN. I think it's a well-deserved award. You have certainly put in the time working on MISMO standards and data standards for the appraisal industry, so thank you for that. Now, Liz, just between you, me, and the fence post, Jim Morrison does this thing to me pretty much every week where he gives me this anonymous appraiser question to try and trip me up and make me look like an idiot. Jim, do we have an anonymous appraiser question that Liz and I could try to tackle?
We do. And I know we always hear feedback from our listeners that they love this. They love these, questions that are stumping an appraiser, and, they love to react to it as well. So if you have any questions that you want an expert from our panel to answer, reach out at comments@appraisalbuzz.com. So this one is pretty short, but it's interesting. It says, I completed an appraisal for a 1004 conventional purchase less than 1 week ago. The lender then called me a couple days later asking if I could switch it to an FHA. I told him I couldn't as I'm not FHA certified. Today, I was asked to give a fee and turn time quote on the exact same property for a different lender in AMC. What do I do here?
Well, so interestingly enough, I think it's important just by the by to know that during the development and design of UAD 3.6, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did encourage and include FHA and VA in not only all of their conversations, but they made a concerted effort to ensure that specific requirements to those entities and USDA were included ultimately in the data set definition and in the design. They are not at this time providing a rollout date for FHA, VA, or USDA to use the new 3.6 UAD. That's number one. So for all intents and purposes, what we're talking about here on a go-forward basis with 3.6 UAD is for conventional loans only.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a sidebar. Now, I do think it's interesting that the scenario that the appraiser portrays, especially coming from two different lenders, it's quite possible that the borrower is talking to two different lenders and has two different deals going. And it's really interesting. The telltale sign to me is that it started as conventional, it went FHA, and then it went to another lender. That, to me, that means the first lender couldn't get the deal done.
Somebody's shopping.
Somebody's shopping. Exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody's shopping. And so, there is the disclosure requirements around if you've done an assignment before, but the flip-flop between the conventional to the FHA has really nothing to do with something that the appraiser did and everything to do with what the borrower and the lender are trying to do with the deal.
Right. And in this case, what I would say to the appraiser is, number one, you answer the first part of the scenario by saying, I'm not FHA qualified, therefore they're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. Now you've got another lender coming to you asking for an appraisal on the same property, and there's nothing in USPAP that prohibits you from doing that as a new assignment. There's nothing that prohibits you. I do think you would have to consider, any confidential information under the first scenario. Were you engaged? Did you start a work file? You probably ought to disclose that to the new lender and put that in your report. But I don't think USPAP prohibits you from accepting a new assignment for another client. But I do think you need to be very clear about, what you've done past work-wise on the property.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, here's the answer. It's a new assignment. You can take it. Just say what you did and say why you did it.
That's right. That's right.
Morrison, does that answer the question?
That is a great answer. And yeah, don't turn down work, Take the work.
I will say one thing too that is usually the sample scenario that we get when we're talking about the new UAD is that the same sorts of things will continue to happen. We still might have a situation where the lender thinks it's a single family site built home and the appraiser gets out there on site and it's not what we thought it was. The good news is that it's faster and easier to bring those additional details into the mix. I don't have to go back, ask for a new form, get a new assignment, maybe change the price, blah, blah, blah. I can just focus on the change to the assignment details as it relates to the feedback loop of here's what we got. You want to keep going? Yep. It's another X, right?
Yep. And again, as Liz said at the very beginning of this podcast, the scope of work is on the appraiser's shoulders. So your clients can ask for any number of things, but the determination of an appropriate scope of work lives on our shoulders as appraisers. So, make sure that you determine what is an appropriate scope of work and then do that amount of work.
I do believe the new data set and thinking of the assignment details as opposed to a form number empowers the appraiser with much more information to do a better job of establishing the scope of work.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. No doubt about that at all. And now I'll say this, as far as the new UAD, URAR goes, one update to it that I'm absolutely thrilled about is the highest and best use section, which is no longer, is it the highest best use? Yes or no? If no, please describe or explain. It's now, is it
questions?
Is it legally permissible? Is it physically possible? Is it financially feasible? Is it maximally productive? It's all there, right there in the spot. So I'm excited about that one little spot. I've always had a little heartburn with the 1004 form and highest best use. I've often made the comment that it'd be awful hard to type out the 4 tests of highest best use and have them fit in that one line without using maybe a 2-point font.
Well, and I think, in that particular section, those conversations, because I remember them vividly, it's like, well, yeah, you're supposed to be doing the 4 questions. We just want to know the summary answer. We don't care about the 4 questions, but it's very nice to have the 4 questions because, again, communication is key. When we can have very detailed communication, well, why? What if, if the answer is no, we want that detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz Green, thank you so much. Jim Morrison, do we have anything else we need to cover today?
No, thanks. Thanks, Liz. Congratulations again. It was a pleasure having you on again.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. And since we have nothing else to cover for Liz Green and Jim Morrison, I'm Hal Humphreys, and that is your Appraisal Buzzcast for this week.